All right, we are recording. Welcome, everyone. While this may not be the first Living a Bold Life interview you see in this new calendar year of 2021, it is the first one that's being recorded. So it's exciting to be back. We're a little delayed as we've been continuing to receive a lot of circumstances this calendar year, but we will not be stopped. So we're delayed, but we're here. And I am with a colleague and a friend today, Ryan Hall. So this interview series will be really highlighting Ryan Hall's bold life. And as you know, if you've been watching the series, we're getting to be brought into a snippet of people's expansive journey. And we're so grateful to be here with you today, Ryan. How are you?
I'm doing great, Jen. Thank you so much for the invitation, and I'm really excited to be able to speak to your audience and to be able to share a little bit about my own bold life.
We're happy to have you. And to give you a little backstory on Ryan, as we get going, Ryan Hall is a certified life coach. Ryan and I actually did go through the same coaching and leadership training. So we've gotten
Yeah,
to know each other in a roundabout way through that.
right. I mean, we weren't classmates, but
Right,
yes, we
we were
graduated from the
classmates.
same program. Yeah.
Yeah, same program, different cities. So we have met through that network. And Ryan is also the author of the 2015 novel Written in the Stone. He was one of the 25 authors published in the Amazon best-selling book, The Great Pause: Blessings and Wisdom from COVID-19. He's the creator and host of the Solar Powered Podcast. And I love the wordplay, Solar Powered Podcast. And Ryan is also the certified life coach for Kings, with a commitment to supporting his clients to share their royal voice with the world. Love that.
Yes.
Love that.
Yes, indeed.
All right. So if you all have been watching the series, as I said, we're excited to be back. If you're new to it, this is really just a way to give other people a chance to share snippets of their journey. As a coach, as a leader who's been getting to play in these waters for almost 7 years now, there's a lot of similarity to people who are really living a bold life, but then there's also each our own flavor. I'm really bringing this to you to normalize a lot of the similar stuff that goes into it, to show you that you're most likely being a lot bolder than you are. We don't give ourselves nearly enough credit. And to just kind of let you see how it's gone for other people, because a lot of the stuff that we're sharing is getting off the highlight reel. You're getting to hear where people have challenges, where they're humans, right? So that's what we're
Yep.
doing here. Um, and so the first question is always the most fun because I never know what my guests are going to share. And so, Ryan, you might have had something that you thought of, or you might pivot in the moment and share what comes to you now. Either way, trust the organic flow, and knowing that you've been on a transformational journey for a while now, and knowing usually once we start that, we kind of continue on with it. So it tends to be a little more challenging when we've been playing the game for a bit. But Ryan, what is one of the boldest moves you have ever made? Knowing that you've made many, what is the one that you feel called to share with us and talk about today?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Before I answer that real quick, just one of the things that you said that really jumped out here. So often, I think on social media, and I'm guilty of this too, it's a very well calculated and highly edited version of who we really are. So we're never truly showing. I mean, I'm very open on social media, but even that's edited. I mean, I'm a writer at heart, so yeah. But to answer your question, it would definitely have to be. This was during a this was during a pretty low time in my life. This was maybe 2012, I think it was. And I I saw a YouTube video from one of my favorites. I mean, I'm a big wrestling fan, and one of my favorites is a guy named Diamond Dallas Page, who did not start in wrestling until he was 35, which was the age that I was at the time that I made this declaration. And this was before I started any coach training or therapy or any of that transformational work. Um, but this was a video where he was talking about a conversation that he had with a man who was known as the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes. Now, Dusty, for those who don't know, Dusty's one of the all-time greats. You know, one of the all-time greats in the ring, one of the all-time greats in, wrestling creative, just had a great mind for the business. And this was a conversation that DDP had with Dusty Rhodes. And the long story short was that um, Page was frustrated with his position in the business. And he was like, I know I'm never going to be the main eventer. I just want to be at the bottom of the top, the guy who goes out and steals the show. And Dusty pretty much read him the riot act. And as soon as they got off the phone, DDP made a declaration where he was going to, quote, win the world championship in 5 years. I mean, I say quote because we all know that this is predetermined, but he won it in just a little over four. And that got me thinking, what big declaration can I make that would, that would be help me get out of the kind of the funk that I was in at the time. And when I say funk, it was a deep, deep, dark depression.
Mhm.
And the declaration that I made was that within 5 years from that point, I was going to be a published author. And it took me a little over three.
Wow.
And um, this was, this was a something that I had been writing for years before this, since I had been like 10 years old. But this was something I did not think in a million years I could ever pull off. But I pulled in some great support. This is what ended up, you know, getting, having me, leading me rather to hire my first coach. And I made it happen. And this was again coming off one of the darkest times of my life, and this is still the proudest accomplishment I've ever had. So yeah, that's the thing that that comes to mind organically, as you said.
Wow. I love that. Yeah, and that's powerful because I'm present to when you said you're in a dark depression funk. And it can be harder to make a powerful declaration from that place. And yet
Yeah.
you did, and that's very courageous. And what I love about your share, Ryan, and I want to point this out because as coaches, you and I know this is how it works very often. Very often when we make a declaration, we do get there quicker than we declare. It's okay if we don't always, but very often we do, because it's a tool to move us there and facilitate it. So really, really want to acknowledge your courage. That's easier said than done. We can say, oh, well, I just made a declaration, but we are very unwilling to say that we're going to do something if we don't know how. And we're really weird when there's a date attached to it, in my experience.
No kidding. And again, this was well before I had any of
Right,
the
right.
coach training.
Which is why I'm
And
enamored. Like you had no training to be able to like say something so big and you attached a date. And like that's a hard thing to do for most of us.
yeah, and just to put a period on that, on my share, the thing that was most powerful about that video to me, which has, tragically been taken down and it still makes me sad, but the most powerful part about that that video to me was the idea of just writing it down.
Mm.
Don't just think it, ink it, write it down, because it becomes real at that point. It becomes terrifying at that point, but it becomes real at that point.
Yeah, and that this article's getting a bit dated now, but if anything, there's just more research. My phone spam keeps calling me. I was going to try to turn them off, but their auto dialer already took them off. Thank you. I was reading an article, and I want to say it was in the New York Times a handful of years ago, and they had done a research study on, it was like students who were in prep schools, right? And they were prepping to go to, like, the big, like, Harvard and that kind of thing, right? And
Right.
so they had test groups where some of the groups did a lot of writing about what it would be like when they got to the school, all that kind of thing. And then the other test group didn't. Every single person who did the writing got in to where they wanted. The ones who didn't did not. So they had a lot of really, really powerful research that really, really did what you say. When you write it down, there's a much, much, much greater chance that it's actually going to happen.
Indeed, absolutely, and that's honestly, as a coach, that's one of the biggest, tools that I have in my toolbox, and also as somebody who has been doing this work for a while, working with coaches for a while, it's one of the biggest tools that I have. It's still one of the more terrifying tools that I have, but it's one of the tools that I have.
Yeah, absolutely. So you all, big takeaway. That's one of those things where it's like, if you're going to take one thing and you're not doing it, take that one. That's a good one.
Yep. No doubt, no doubt.
And so for you, Ryan, your bold move, it was to start going after being a published author in a certain amount of time. And so, and don't worry if you already kind of spoken to it. The questions are organic, which is why most people start to answer before they already get to the next one. I wrote them in an organic way. Um, so you might kind of repeat yourself, you might not, just go with it. But when push came to shove, for most of us, there's something that gets us to actually declare it, or to get us to do it, where we're like, enough's enough already, I'm going to do it, right?
Right.
So when push came to shove, what was it that either got you to declare it, got you to start making the moves to work toward it? What was really that breaking point for you?
Honestly, I think it was the depression. Yeah, I think it was the depression, because at the time that I made this declaration, I was really in a, like I said earlier, I was in a really dark place. I was almost suicidal at times. Um, Unemployed, broke, I was just in a really dark place. But I knew that I needed, and really wanted to get out. And I had been saying for years that I wanted to, again, I had been writing for a long time. I've written, before I wrote my first book, I think I'd written like something like 7 or 8 movie screenplays, a couple of stage plays. And that was really what I was most comfortable with, but I knew that I wanted to have something that, good Lord willing, I could put on a shelf in a Barnes& and Noble somewhere. Um, and I knew that I wanted to pull that out of my toolbox, and yeah, I I just think, to answer your question, I wanted to get out of that hole. I wanted to find some life back in me that I honestly had not been feeling for a long time up until that point. So yeah.
I love that. What way I love that, in like the big thing that I heard in that is, I think for most people, depression is such a low energetic state that it can be hard to kind of get out of it. And I think for many of us, we would hold that as, well, I'm depressed, so I can't get out of this and I'm stuck. And for you, the depression actually was the catalyst. So, for
Yeah.
anyone listening, like, what if your low state was actually so low, it could maybe propel you up? That's a really cool way to look at it. Cause I think a
Yeah.
lot of times we don't.
Yeah. No, indeed, indeed. And I think one of the things that's coming to mind is that this was like 3 years after my mom had passed away. She passed away in '09. And seeing the way that she got sick and her depression and her just kind of her life just kind of draining out of her body before her body even died. Like, I knew I did not want that. I knew that I did not want to go out like that, and I made some tough choices. I made some tough decisions, and that's what came out of it.
That's beautiful. And for any listeners, who are listening and who might be depressed and who might be thinking, well, great, Ryan, I'm not able to get out of that and make those tough choices. My invitation to any of you would be, consider asking for some help and for some
Indeed.
support.
Absolutely. One of my one of my favorite metaphors is that the hardest and most difficult key to press on any computer keyboard is F1,
Mm,
help. Because when you're in that dark place, you think nobody's going to want to help me, nobody's going to want to support me. You're unlovable, all the kind of stuff that I'm going to be talking to my therapist later on today about. And just press that make that first step. The first step, it's cliche, but that first step is the most difficult.
it truly
It
is.
really, yeah.
I love what you shared. I think it gives us a different way to look at some things. And so, for many of us, like yourself, when we do have um, that transformative moment where things change, or moments, right? We know they're not limited to one. For many of us, it's just one in a series because we know it gets easier, right? We build the muscle to it. So we're like, oh, that's not so scary. I could do that again. And we start getting momentum. So, Ryan, in a way that's true for you, um, one thing I've found for people who tend to kind of be on the journey of taking a lot of leaps, being bold, up to cool stuff, moving the needle forward. What I've found is for many of us, we seem to almost get like a formula per se of, well, to kind of keep living like this, I know there are certain things that are non-negotiable for me. These are the things that I really need to have in place. Some of us have very similar ones, some of us have very different ones, but what I found to be true is most of us have something where we need to kind of adhere to a structure, a system to kind of keep us grounded, to keep us well. For you, is there any things that just kind of come up right off the bat where, oh, yeah, these are some of the things that are really true for me to have in place?
Well-being, without a doubt, well-being, because if my well-being is out of whack, everything's going to be out of whack. And I'll give you a great example. It's a little bit more recent, but this past summer, when the pandemic was at its peak, I mean, you can argue that it's still at its peak right now, that it's even worse than it was in the summer, but you know, we won't get into that. But when just personally for me, my pandemic, the pandemic was at its worst. I My business was struggling, and it's still struggling, honestly. But like, I was struggling personally, gaining a bunch of weight. I made a I just had like a line in the sand moment. And the next morning, I woke up, put on some workout clothes for the first time in a long time, and I went for a run.
Mm.
I never liked running before. I mean, as the fat kid in PE class coming up, I never liked to run, but I grew to love it. And it just really helped, as I like to say, it kind of helped to get the crap out of this big dome that lives on my shoulders so the gold can flow. My coaching is better. My podcasts have been better. My writing is worlds better. My work is better. It really helps. So, well being, getting that balance, eating better, drinking more water, getting better sleep, it's all it all ties in. It all ties in. So if my well-being is out of whack, which in 2012 it was absolutely out of whack, and honestly in 2020 it was out of whack there for a while, it was just that's the biggest, to answer your question, that's the biggest thing that's coming to mind is if my well-being is out of whack, nothing is going to work. Absolutely nothing is going to work.
And I believe that every guest has mentioned that in some way
I'm not surprised.
or form, which really, really excites me. Um, because, I think we're still kind of undigging from this horrible lie that self-care is selfish. And, like when you just sit down and really think about, like, oh, if I take good care of myself, things go well and I feel good and I'm happy and joyful. It's not rocket science, is it? And I will say, and I'm going to beat this home for every listener in every session. My biggest breakthroughs in my life, in my business, money, relationship, whatever you want to call it in, they always, always, always come by way of a self-love, self-care breakthrough, well-being, all the time.
Yes.
All the
Complete
time.
completely. Finding a good therapist, getting a self-care routine, exercising, eating better foods. It's not rocket science. Human beings are, we're not robots. We have to be maintained.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's just really science, right? Like, oh, if I want to be living my best life, I got to show up as my best self. But if I'm eating nothing but crap and sleeping 2 hours a night, am I really going to show up as my best self?
Nope.
Probably not, right?
Yeah, probably not. Yeah.
And
You
it's
can
fun.
you can fake it pretty well.
And I did. I
Yeah.
faked it very, very well all through high school, all through my 20s. And then I was like, oh, I was kind of a really big jerk because I was tired all the time. Didn't really realize that. Oh, okay, that's eye-opening.
Yeah, it's like that was the moment you heard the game show bells going off in your head.
Yeah, I love that you said that because I think that's a really, really important one to normalize.
Yeah.
And it is the most important, folks. The one that you'll want to throw out the window first, and it's the one to pick up the quickest.
Mhm.
And so, Ryan, this question is, of course, one that none of us can possibly know the answer to, so we just try to imagine. But, what I also really love to the point that I like to make is, these bold moves that we make, there's no right or wrong. There's just a choice, right? And we're either going to choose that and move in a direction. And so I really want to get people to see, like, there's no judgment here. No one's judging you if you're not making bold moves. You get to do whatever works for you, but there's going to be an impact to whatever it is you choose. And so we can hear when when Ryan made the choice to make the bold move and say, wow, I don't want to do this anymore. I'm making this declaration. I'm going to start to make moves to be a published author in X amount of time. we are getting to be with the impact of Ryan's choice, right? He did it in a shorter amount. He took a self-care back. He went through a coaching and leadership training, like a bunch of really cool stuff happened. And again, we don't know this, Ryan, but to the best of your ability, if you go back to witness the trajectory things were moving, if you did not make that choice at that time to go for it, where do you think you might have been led? Where do you think you might be if you and I were having this conversation right now?
If I did not make certain choices, certain
Yep,
declarations, and made
yep,
certain things happen,
yep.
that's a great question. Um, I would probably be absolute, have just
Mm,
completely miserable with myself. I'd probably be drinking a lot more. I'd probably be, just completely angry and bitter and not very nice to be around because I don't, you know, I just would not be very nice to be around. I would be miserable. I'd be self-hating. It would not be nice to be in my space. Um, I and growing bitter and grumpy and just mean.
yeah, yeah, I get that.
Bunch of anger too, probably.
Yeah, and I love what you're sharing because I think so many humans do experience self-loathing. I used to before this journey as well.
Yeah.
That was a really easy access for me, actually. You would have been unpleasant to be around. I also was very unpleasant to be around a lot. Um, you would have stayed on the path of misery. And what we know is when we aren't feeling good, we do want to drink more and drug more to numb the pain. We do these things to decrease our pain. And you would have been angry. And there's a lot of people miserable, drinking, angry. And I don't know that we've made the connection that this is the impact of a life unlived, of a soul unclaimed. Like when we make the choice, like, I'm going to honor this life, I'm going to honor this soul, we start to get out of those lower emotional frequencies.
Yeah.
And what you painted was, it sounded like if you wouldn't have made the choice to be inspired and just say, hey, let's try this, you would have just gone kind of more into the dark.
Yep. Yep. And I honestly, I may have made a choice that I could not walk back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But just to piggyback on what you just said, something that comes up is that these things are not binary. These are not like light switch things, for me at least. These are not like light switch things that you can just turn off and turn on and like, hey, I'm going to love myself today. Flip, you know? These are constant choices. These are constant choices. If I make a mistake, sometimes I feel a lot of that old kind of nasty vibration come back up and I have to make that choice. Sometimes I just have to say out loud, stop it. This is not this, don't go down this road. Sometimes it means talking to my inner child. I mean, it's not a binary thing. These are constant choices, daily, minutely, hourly choices that I constantly make, and it has, you know, living living that human life means making those constant choices.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. I think one, it's important to normalize that it's not just like, oh, what happened? I'm not supposed to have to, this is not supposed to be hard anymore, right? But I like that you normalize the constant re-choosing. Because one, I think it's a great reminder that every moment truly is a new moment. It sounds cliche, but we've got the choice in every moment to choose, right? So maybe the morning we realize, oh, I'm a very old version of myself. Where is this day going? And then we realize, I can turn this around. I can choose something different. Or if we just really have those rough days, sometimes it's remembering sleep is a great reset. Tomorrow we're going to come back. It's okay.
This too shall pass.
Right.
It might pass like a kidney stone, but this too shall pass.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really important. So, people that are listening who may not be having a great experience right now, you know, consider that maybe it could come down to one choice like it did for Ryan, which could totally have enough energy to start pulling you out of it. And keep in mind, Ryan was depressed, very depressed. It wasn't just like oh, I had a bad day. He was depressed. And so it took a bold declaration and he started moving, because when we're not living the life we want to be living, we do get mad. We have parts that are pissed, we have parts that are miserable.
Yeah. Yeah. We're human. We have feelings.
Imagine that.
Yeah, no, this happens to all of us, man. It happens to all of us.
And Ryan, what I love about the last question is every interview I've done, there's just been so much gold throughout the whole session, which I think is great, because people could come in and watch the first 5 minutes, the last 5 minutes, the whole thing, and they're going to get a nugget. And I'm a believer they're going to get the nugget that they need. So you've already given us so much amazing stuff, declaration, depression as a catalyst, well-being, writing it down. But if you were to go out on a note where you get to leave our listeners with one last nugget, might be something you already said, might be something totally brand new. What comes up to you in this moment as the thing that you really want to go out on that note for today?
Yeah. The thing that the nugget that I would like to leave your viewers with is this. It gets better.
Mm.
It gets better. As long as there's a I I have written a second novel. I just haven't gotten it published yet. That's a declaration that I have for the 2021 calendar year, by the way. But there is a great line. One of my favorite paragraphs that I've ever written. That it's never too late. It's never too late to write a new story. It's never too late to sing a new song. It's never too late to live as long as you still have as long as this still works, as long as you can still draw breath, and as long as your heart still pumps through your body, it's never too late. And that's the nugget that I want to leave your listeners with today is it's never too late. Never stop trying.
I love that. It gets better and it's never too late. So never stop trying. And it does. I've had the same experience. And even if things are amazing for you right now, like they can still even be more amazing, and as you just become more who you are. And I think the message to never give up is always an important one. Again, a lot of the stuff we talk about sounds cliche, but what I've found since I've been on my own journey, in coaching and therapy, all these other things, when you start to embody what the words mean, they change. You know what I mean? Like, so a lot of the stuff that I used to think sounded cliche, when I know what it feels like and I know how to live it, it's very different. So I love what you're saying, because any of us who are going for something we've never done before, we're not going to know how, it's probably not going to be easy, and there's so much opportunity to say, I quit.
Yes. Yes, because like it's like you said, so often we hear, before I got into this transformational work, so often I would hear a lot of these like spiritual gurus, like your Tony Robbins type, say certain things that just sounded like complete pablum, just complete cliche. But when you embody the message, it really brings it home that this ain't that deep. It just isn't that deep.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you, Ryan, for sharing so generously with us today.
My pleasure.
And those of you who are listening, thank you for holding the space. There's a lot of power when a human shares their story for them and for you, bearing witness to it. And again, this is Ryan Hall. Ryan's a certified life coach. He's author. So if you are interested in learning more about Ryan, checking out his books, checking out his coaching, whatever platform you're viewing this video on, just go to wherever the verbiage is, because I'm going to have all that written in there. Ryan will be tagged so you can find him. And if you know anyone who this episode would really impact, my invitation is to share it. Um, People who have gotten access to some of these videos, the timing has been really magical for them, and it's given people hope when they've lost it. People who've been on the same journey have gotten to hear it, and it's been helpful. So never forget how much it matters for people to hear stuff like this when they need to hear it. And I'm not asking you to do this from a salesy place. It's truly to support humanity. So please share the video with anyone who might need it, because we've got to take care of each other. And if there's anything 2020 has showed us, is it's we need community. So let's share and be in this conversation together even more for 2021.
Amen.
Ryan, such an honor and such a privilege to get to be with you and have this conversation.
All right. Thank you so much for having me, Jen.
Thank you.